Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to GTF Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia. Just a quick programming note. This is not the only live Chicago Bears-themed podcast. We have one tonight at 5:50 p.m. Central Time. It's the Willis Twin Towers podcast. They will be talking lots of Chicago Bears, and they'll also be talking to their guest about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So that is a must-see. And then on Sunday morning, get ready for the Bears game with the Barfly Tailgate Show, 9 a.m. Central, and then we'll have continuing coverage of the game throughout the day right here on the Barroom Network. And then Greg and I will be back on Monday to discuss the game. Speaking of Greg, let me bring him in now. Greg
Hello.
Gabriel, how are you, my friend?
I'm getting better, slowly but surely.
Good to hear. Good to hear. You look great.
But I
too,
may
buddy.
cough. I may make cough a few times, but nothing
All right.
I can do about that.
Absolutely not. You cough away, and if it bothers my ears, I will mute your microphone.
No, I'll just say mute me. I'm going to cough.
Okay, that sounds good. This is a special show, Greg, and it's a Q&A show. And I probably before I sent out the tweet on X, the post on X, I should have probably put some criteria to some of the questions. Should we talk about that a little bit at the start of the show?
Sure. Let me ask before you do that. We had talked about doing those wide receivers too, or do you want to save that?
Let's save that. Okay. Yeah.
But I want to talk about why we're going to do it. You know, it's a kind of like an exercise we did when I was working with the Bears. I want to explain what we did.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it when
you can do this, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. So some of the questions, there are questions that nobody can answer other than the people at Hallis Hall. So you might have phrased a question that is asking Greg to speculate on something, and that, of course, wouldn't be fair to Greg. We might be able to rephrase the question and ask it from a theoretical standpoint. And then there were some other questions, Greg, that perhaps you don't want to get into because it would be unfair to certain people. Can you explain that?
Well, right now there's 5 games to go, and Matt Eberflus is the head coach. Okay. Regardless of what some people want to write in the media and what other people want to say on the radio, he still has a job. And until that changes or it becomes 100% obvious, because there's no way it's 100% obvious right now. There's a lot of people, in fact, listening to Wannstedt yesterday, and Wani goes, I think he saved his job already. But that's his opinion. Okay. And that's all it is right now, is opinion. And having been in the business and had to listen to some of that stuff while sitting in Hallis Hall, I didn't like it, because a lot of times it's bullshit, because what's going on, and you can't come out with a statement every day. Once you come out with a statement once, you're giving in. You gotta answer every single statement or rumor or theory that comes out going forward, and you don't want to do that. You just shut up.
Right. Well, and that could lead to my first question that I have for you.
Okay.
And this is about arguing at Hallis Hall and at the 31 other headquarters for the National Football League. And I'll give you a hypothetical, sort of. Earlier in the season, you were done with Justin Fields. You said, I have seen enough to know that this guy is not the answer. And then over time, you said, well, wait a minute, I'm changing my mind because I'm seeing more and more issues with the offensive coordinator, or how, I don't know if you worded it precisely that way.
Well,
but
I had the issues with the play calling.
Okay.
Like what, nine freaking screen passes or something like that last week. And now
Yes.
I'll tell you what I don't like. And I guess Getsy talked yesterday, and he kind of threw Fields under the bus. And it's not the first time he's done it. And, about, well, these are RPOs, so Justin's got the option. And then somebody said to me on a question on Twitter, yeah, but it wasn't his call to call the RPO that has that option. And, there's truth to it on both sides. Whether we're never going to know if it was a mistake on Justin's part, if he should have handed off versus the screen. But a bunch of those didn't look like they were RPOs to me. They looked like they were flat out screen passes.
Totally agree.
And different things. And there's just way too many, especially when the other team knows that they're coming. If you times a game in certain moments of the game, that's fine. But to use as a staple of the offense, that's ridiculous. And there's a lot better ways that you could attack all-out blitzing like Minnesota was doing. But that being said, I think where I've come about face a little bit on Justin is that I don't think the play calling does him any service. We've seen some really good games.
Yeah.
So there's talent there. And I want to say this too. The scheme itself is an excellent scheme. San Francisco uses it. The Rams use it. Green Bay uses it. Houston's using it right now. They all have their own little take on it, but it's a damn good scheme, and it's proven to be a winner. Okay, now it gets, how are you using that scheme? And that's in the hands of the guy calling the plays.
Yep. All right. So that leads to my question. Have you ever experienced yourself or heard of a story that you can share with us of a scouting director having problems with the head coach or a coordinator regarding how they are handling a player that they pounded the table for and said, this guy is going to be a good player for this organization, a good player for the NFL, but you are, excuse my language, fucking him up?
Well, yeah, but like in any corporate situation, you've got chains of command. So let's say, hypothetically, we drafted a guy and I didn't like the way he's being used. Okay. It's not my job. Lovey was here most of the time I was there. It wasn't my job to go to Lovey. Okay. I'm overstepping bounds. My job is to go to Jerry and talk to Jerry. Then it's Jerry's job to say he can agree or disagree. And then when he has his daily meetings with Lovey, he can bring stuff up. And he can even say, hey, Greg thinks you ought to be using so-and-so differently. Lovey might say, oh, Greg isn't coaching. Well, Lovey and I had a great relationship. So I'm just, throwing shit at the wall here. But, but that's how you would do it. You got to work it the right way. And the last thing you want to do is start ruffling feathers, because that makes the situation worse.
Okay. Well, I find it to be fascinating because I think that, some of that could be going on at Hallis Hall right now. There could be, scouts and scouting directors and so forth unhappy with this coaching regime or coordinators regarding how some of the players are being handled. But we'll talk about that more as time goes on. Let's get to some of the questions.
One second. Fairness is with that, though. If it is or it isn't, we're never going to know. It's not going to be put out there. Somebody can, write it, or rumor has it. Well, rumor is rumor. Unless you know it's fact.
Yeah,
then it's a different story.
absolutely.
Because there's a lot of rumors, and especially, people have narratives. There's been a lot of narratives going on in this town over the last month, 6 weeks about who should be playing, who should be coaching, who should be good. It's opinion. A lot of it, especially when it comes from talk radio, is to set a narrative within the fan base because they know they can lead that. They got the listeners to do it. And so they can set up for discontent if they want. They can run that any way they want. Is that fair? See, I don't think it's fair. That's why I don't like it. Let's talk facts and be above board. And if you don't know what the facts are, you shut the fuck up. Excuse my language, because then we're talking on our rear end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a lot of that on, especially now with social media. Everything is amplified because opinions that were only shared in a bar are now all over the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I get that. I don't have to agree with it, but I get it.
Right, indeed. Okay, let's get to some of the questions. Let me start with some of the ones that came in via X yesterday. I start with Gillian, who says, there we go. If the Bears fire Eberflus, do you think Poles should stay or go? And so, obviously, we just added a disclaimer to that.
This one. I'll answer this one.
All right.
Poles ain't going anywhere. You can take that to the bank. What happens with the other thing, that remains to be seen. Okay, and there could be a lot of different scenarios. In fairness, there's things you can put on Flus. There's things you can that maybe aren't totally his fault, but he's the head coach, so in essence, it's his fault. So and until, like I say, it becomes obvious, and that's like I'm on record of saying they got to win 4 out of 5. There's 5 left. They got to win 4. Maybe 3, but I think it's closer to 4, including this week, including up in Green Bay, that, if he wants to save his job. So, but until that happens, it's all speculative. Now, all of a sudden you lose the next 3 games. Well, then I think, it could be a foregone conclusion because then at most you're going to win 6 games on the year. Or, so let's see how that one plays out. But as far as Poles, he ain't going anywhere. And like I say, I think you can take that one to the bank.
Well, Greg, isn't there a caveat to what you said about winning against Detroit and in Green Bay? For instance, if the Bears, if it's a 21-20 game and Justin throws a perfect pass into the end zone and the rookie drops the pass or the veteran drops the pass, you're not going to blame that loss on Eberflus, what I'm saying? And in other words,
how many times does a game actually get down to one play?
Yeah, no, rarely.
So you can go back. I'll give you a perfect example. In Super Bowl 25 against Buffalo, we had a 3rd and goal or something on like the 3-yard line. And Otis Anderson took it in for a touchdown, which would have taken the field goal attempt by Buffalo, would have made it mean nothing, even a touchdown for them, because we would have had better than a 8-point lead at that point. But there was a holding call on that touchdown, negated the touchdown. We kick a field goal. Buffalo goes down. They attempt the field goal. They did it. But was that one play the difference? No. How about we held on to the ball for 42 minutes for that game and shut down their offense? That's what was the story of the game, was not one freaking play.
Yeah. Jeff writes, totally agree with you, Greg. When was the last time a GM collected this kind of capital between draft picks and salary cap health? Poles has done a good job in terms of the rebuild. He's made some mistakes, like every GM has made mistakes.
There's no virgins in this world, trust me. They all make mistakes, and some are going to be bigger than others. You know what? But you got to look at the whole body of work, and you look at his plan. His plan is a good, sound plan.
Yes,
the way he wants to do it. What cracks me up, and we'll get into it as we get closer to the draft, is how many people keep pushing for certain positions for him to draft. And when you look at he spent his whole career in Kansas City, and you look what Kansas City did and who we learned from, they ain't doing with that. That's not his philosophy. And he's already shown it in 2 drafts.
Yeah. Jordan makes an interesting point here. What a shame for Greg, though, and others in a scouting department. They watch players constantly being asked to move and play out of position. Hester played cornerback and wide receiver. Olsen was traded away. And then he goes on, GM is supposed to buy the groceries, and his scouting staff is supposed to point him to the best brands and types of groceries. The coaches are the chefs, and they are missing those groceries, ingredients.
Okay,
What do you think?
I want to answer that. First of all, let's go to Devin. Devin was drafted to be a DB. Devin had played some running back at Miami, and let's be fair. Miami didn't know what the hell to do with Devin. He was a very talented kid when he had the ball in his hand. Great punt returner. Some of his punt returns at Miami are just like historical. They're so freaking good. They're highlight film. One against Duke was outrageous. But he played some running back. I don't think he played wide receiver, but he played DB, but he couldn't find a position. Part of it was Devin was not a real confident guy when he was real young. He was confident in his own abilities, but he wasn't like outgoing. And I'm not going to say he was in a shell, but we learned through doing our research that, is that old saying that you got to coach every player alike? And that's the biggest misnomer ever made. You coach a player to get the best out of that player, and whatever it takes to get out of that player. And with Devin, you had to put your arm around him and love him. Yeah. You did not get in his face and holler at him. You got in his face and hollered at him, he was going in the tank. So and we got the best out of him. Now, what happened was, he was like a returner in like the 5th corner as a rookie. But because he was the 5th corner, and he had like a 10-man practice squad back then, 9-man practice squad. Some of the guys, these backups, had to play for the scout team another position. So Devin was a wide receiver on the scout team when our defense was practicing. Nobody on the damn defense could cover the guy, and he's raw. So it was like, we got to make this guy a receiver. And that's how it happened. It had nothing to do with trying to screw him up. The best place for him was receiver. He was never going to be number 1. At best, he was going to be a number 3.
Right.
Part of it was inexperience at position, but we knew we had reached his ceiling at corner, and he probably never would have been better than a 4. I mean, we drafted him to be a returner, to do what he's going to get in the Hall of Fame for doing, and then everything else was a bonus.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask, do you think that Jay Cutler helped or hindered or didn't matter to Hester's progression as a wide receiver?
I was only with Jay like 1.5 years, so I can't really. But Jay had talent, but he was a motherfucker. Okay. And there's a lot of people he didn't do any favors for.
Right.
So, now with Greg Olsen, Jerry didn't want to get rid of him. I didn't want to get rid of him. Nobody wanted to get rid of him. One guy wanted to get rid of him, Mike Martz, because Mike Martz didn't know what the hell to do with him.
Oh my God.
And Lovey being the guy that hired Mike Martz, he had to have Mike. We tried to talk Lovey out of hiring Mike Martz for a month and a half. He said it's not the right decision, and Lovey wouldn't do it. Martz gave Lovey his first DC job. Lovey felt indebted to him or whatever, but Martz had no idea what to do with Greg Olsen. And so he wasn't there to play. And you know, to this day, Jerry said, I didn't want to do it. I had no choice.
Wow.
And see, he was going to sit on the bench or maybe not even be active, or I can try to get something for him.
Yeah. Wow. It does seem, you know, that the GM, well, I don't know. I'm going to wrestle with that one a little bit because it seems to me like, hey, we brought you in here. There's quality people here. Figure out a way to use that quality.
Yeah, but see that's the thing. You got contracts involved here now, Aldo.
Yeah.
And you got people and
yeah. Okay.
The GM decides who's on the team. The coach decides who plays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You cannot make a coach play a guy. You're violating his contract if you do. You can suggest, you can't make them.
Yeah.
Unless the GM has power over who plays, and there might be one or two. Of course, you got Belichick, who he's got control over everything. You know, so but it was a disservice on Mike Mark's part to not, you know, really a disservice against Greg Olson, who, on top of being a great footballer, is a quality person. Great football player is a quality person. Great guy. And, you know, he didn't want to leave here. But like I said, we had no choice. And you know, people can complain and bitch about it, but I guess the best way to answer is you have to be in the situation to see, you know, and it's like there was a free agent we wanted to sign, and I can't remember his name offhand, but he was a pretty good pass rusher. And Lovey dug his heels in, said, I don't want him. But we all wanted him. And so it's like, well, Lovey says, go ahead and sign him. I'm not playing him. And I'm in charge of who plays. So we didn't sign him. You know, so, and that happened. It doesn't just happen here. It happens everywhere. You know, you got coaches want to play certain guys. And I learned one thing through that and other things. You can never force a player down a coach's throat. That coach will find a way to ruin that player.
Yep.
Okay, so just walk away from it, move on, and get to the next guy.
And you can't force a coach, a position coach, or a coordinator on a head coach. Same results. You're gonna.
Well, the coach. Stuff that has changed, and again, it's contractual. For years and years and years, the coach had total control over his coaching staff. In recent years, there's been GMs hiring some coaches because a lot of times the coaches, you know, depending on what their experience is, where they've been they don't have a full idea how good some of these people are. And so, you know, they want to be put in a familiar situation. I know him, I trust him, yada, yada, yada. Well, one thing we used to have the scouts do, their job wasn't to only scout football players. Their job is to scout coaches. You know, so they're at Michigan, they're at Notre Dame, whatever. And they see a coach or two coaches, position coaches that are really good. You know, just watching them work with the players. And they say, this guy belongs in the NFL. Then you keep track of that. You write a little report, and we have, you know, guys and then you start to do research on it. So that if a position job opens up, you can say, hey, talk to this guy. You know, we got some good reports on this guy, how good he is.
Okay. Good stuff, Greg. And we've got several more questions here. Let me go to Baba Black Sheep. Last night on Twitter, he wrote, who is your favorite Bears that you helped to draft and why? Baba Black Sheep wants to know.
Yeah, I fall in love with all of them. I mean, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into a draft. Which that can bring up where I was going to, you know, we're talking about the tape, you know, with the wide receivers.
Right.
What we used to do going into the draft, say for the final month, We get into April, and before the scouts came in for meetings, every afternoon, Jerry, myself, Lovey, the coordinator on that side of the ball, and the position coach would sit and watch tape. Now, back when I came here, and actually the whole time I was here, nothing was digitized. It was just starting to get digitized when I left, but everything was on beta. Okay, so, and now, you can do things so much more quickly with everything being digitized. But back then it was on beta. So we used to make what we call time codes. And, for lack of a better term, you could say it was a highlight film, but it really wasn't a highlight film because it had highlights and lowlights. So when I'm watching a game, let's say I'm watching Michigan, Ohio State, and I'm doing the players, when I see plays that I like, let's say I'm doing an offensive tackle. So for an offensive tackle, you might, for one game, profile 25 plays. Now you're not going to profile his best 25 because you want to put what's good and bad on that tape. So when it's all said and done, the profile tape is going to cover tons of games, and sometimes both as junior season and senior season. And, there might be 300 plays on that thing or more when it's over. And like I say, good and bad. And so then the idea is exactly what that player is by watching the profile tape. You can take a DB. DB is not involved in every play. So it's really, you got to watch a ton of tape because they're not involved. Right. So, but an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman, they're involved in every play. So it's easy to do it. But you want to get an idea of what the player is, and the profile tape was supposed to be pretty damn close to what that player was. So we would have the players, ranked in levels that the scouting staff had already set up. A level, B level, and C level. Then we'd watch it. We'd start with the A's. And we'd go all through the profile tape, then go on to the next guy, then go on to the next guy, then go on to the next guy. And when you're doing back to back to back to back like that, it's real easy to rank them order because it's right there in front of you. And there's nothing getting in the way from being able to analytically look at that player and see where the strong points are or his weak points are and who you'd rather have. So then at the end, we get done with the A players. Okay, let's rank them. Okay, this guy's number 1, this guy's number 2, this guy's number 3, this guy's number 4. We did that for every freaking position.
Wow.
Especially, the positions that we knew we were going to hit early. So we had, and then we have, because the cross-check scout wasn't there, and the cross-check scout, obviously the cross-check scout was a position cross-check scout. So like Ballard had the DBs. Ballard and I both did the DBs, and because there's always so many of them. So I would do more safeties and Chris would do more corners. But let's say we're doing corners. Chris lived down in Texas, so he wasn't going to be up here a month before. He's got schools to go to. But we'd get him on the phone. Tell us about this guy versus this guy, because you've done it, and just get his opinion. So you're getting a pretty thorough discussion, which brings me to what I wanted to do with some of these wide receivers.
Okay.
Personally, after doing a lot of these guys, I'm not saying anything against Marvin Harrison. The guy is a great player. But he's not head and shoulders above the next guy. The next guy to me would be Neighbors from LSU. Okay. When you start looking at these guys and you can see, and you go back to back to back like that, it's like, yeah, now I see it. But Marvin Harrison's got a publicity machine that is second to none. And it starts with his father being in the Hall of Fame. So he's got to be great. His dad was in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But you watch all the tape, and he's been annoying. Again, I'm not taking anything away from him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that when you get into drafting, you take him second or third. No, you don't. Maybe I'd rather have Neighbors at 9 to get a better player at a premium position.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the whole purpose of why I want to do that, because a lot of the fans, they just hear stuff. They don't know. Taking anything away from it, they don't know. I mean, they're not professional evaluators. Oh yeah, he's great. You got to have him. There's a couple of people around here that got love affairs with Marvin Harrison, which is fine. But last year they had love affairs with Jackson Smith and Jigba. We had to have him in the top 8. He's the guy you got to get. In fact, I have to take him with the 9th pick we got, or the 10th pick we got from Carolina in that trade down. He's the guy. Well, where'd he go? 19 or 20? Did he have a big year? No, he got 45 catches, and he's averaging 10 yards a game. In other words, they're giving this guy a BJ, and he didn't deserve it. He's a good player. He's not a difference maker.
Excellent. Well, and then we saw last night, if you saw the Steelers game, Pickens, the wide receiver from the Steelers, a lot of us Bears fans wanted him. And
he's a fucking dog.
He really is, man.
A talented dog. But
yes.
You know what? When you do the research, and that's why you hire scouts, that to go out and find out. You can have Georgia coaches jumping on the table for this kid. He's disruptive. He's selfish. He's an I be my guy. And one play, I didn't watch the whole game, but I turned on and I watched. They showed his effort for blocking. He stood at the line of scrimmage.
And Deontay Johnson did that a couple of games ago. So you got to wonder, have they stopped listening to Tomlin?
That falls on it does. Well, falls on the receiver coach first, but Tomlin should be all over the ass of the receiver coach.
Yep.
When you get that kind of effort, that's not helping your run game.
Mm-hmm.
Compare that with, you can say what you want about Flus and everything, but look at the effort the receivers here give at the blocking game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. We got a lot of questions to get to, so let's go to BT9. Greg. Yeah, I love that. If Latu, the edge out of UCLA, passes his medicals, do you see him worthy of a top 5 pick? And do you see him as one of the best pass rushers since Bosa? This is a great question, Greg, because I've been wondering that too. I've started playing around a little bit with mock drafts just to get familiar with some of the players that are available. I'll do the research on players. And to me, Latu seems like the best.
Hands down.
Yeah.
Not even close. Is he a top 5 talent? Absolutely.
Ooh.
The big question is, does he? And it's a legitimate concern, but reality is it really, or should it be a concern? And this might take me a couple minutes to explain. He played his freshman year, 2019, at the University of Washington. Ball practice in 20. He hurts his neck. He's got to have surgery. So he's going to miss the season. 6-7 months later, I guess he still had numbness. And I got numbness in my leg where I had my Achilles surgery and my knee replacement. And it's years later. I mean, that's nerve situation. And I guess when you get as old as I do, nerves don't recuperate as fast as with a young guy. But anyway, because of that, they would not pass his medical and would not allow him to play football again at the University of Washington. So then, he sat out 20, and he even sat out 21. He was like buying in. But then he gets into 21, and he's feeling really good. Like this. So it's like, I'm going to transfer. Or, beginning of 22, he transfers in that spring. He transfers to UCLA. So he goes through practice at UCLA the whole fall of 22, spring and fall practice for the 23 season. He hadn't missed any time. He hadn't missed practice time. He hasn't missed game time. He hasn't gotten hurt. He's been productive as hell. So one of the criteria a lot of doctors use is, has he played?
Right.
And he's played. Has he missed time because or had another recurrence or anything? In this case, nope. So that will play big into whatever the evaluation. Now, the biggest thing will be, probably within an hour of him getting off the bus at the Players Hotel in Indy, he's going to have an MRI on his neck. And that MRI is going to go to 32 doctors. And they'll probably be, now, there might be a team that brings a spine specialist with them to the combine just for that particular guy because he's so good. There probably will be a spine specialist there. But the bottom line is 32, it's like grades in a draft. 32 teams aren't going to have the same grade on him. Some are going to say he's good to go. No restrictions, take him whenever you want him. Others are going to be, I don't know, red flag. And then there could be others say, well, I don't want him, hurting his neck and get paralyzed on my watch. Being more of caution. Well, you know what? That can happen to you or I. You get hit right way. It doesn't have anything to do with the other injury. So because of my experience with how the people deal with injuries and how the doctors look at them, because a lot of times doctors look at them, when they come up with a prognosis, they're looking at what they already know from previous experience, say with a similar type injury. So they use that. But I think it's fair to say he's going in the first round. Somebody's going to take him pretty damn high. How the Bears are going to feel, I don't know. I guarantee you they're going to bring his ass in, and he's going to go to some specialist who's the best in town with that type of thing, and they're going to come up with an idea and a prognosis and say he's either good or bad. And you know what? And there's going to be reports. You get he's fine. He passed his physical. Rappaport will put it out, or Schefter or somebody like that.
All right.
Well, you know what? Yeah, they got that from one team, and one team said he passed their physical. That does not mean the other 31 teams did.
Exactly.
So you got to be. That's the publicity hype machine, and you got to be very, very careful. There's a lot of times I've seen where they put out, oh yeah, he's fine, he's good to go, and we got him flunked. So no, he's not good to go for every team because I know he's not good to go with us.
That's good stuff. All right, back to our questions. Let's see. The Shy Animal. Will the Bears take a left tackle in the first round or continue to stay the course with Braxton? I can answer this because you've said it a million times. Braxton Jones is the left tackle of the Chicago Bears Sunday and for the foreseeable future. And that could be a long time.
There's not a person in household that doesn't think he's going to be great.
Yeah.
And I know that for a fact. Okay. Now, Braxton Jones, and we've said this many times, he's got traits that first rounders have. He's over 6'5". He's got 35 and like a half or 35 and a quarter inch arms. That's exactly what you want. He was real strong in the upper body. Great athlete. He ran 4.89 and 315 pounds or 314 pounds. Guy's an athlete. And when you watch tape, when he's out in space, he does things that very few big linemen can do. What he didn't have last year, and it showed, was a good anchor. But he worked on that during the offseason. Part of that is where he came from. He came from Southern Utah, a lousy FCS program, and that never won any games. So the traits were there. When you're drafting a football player, especially a lineman, you're looking for traits. He's got elite traits. Don't forget, he didn't miss one play as a rookie. Every single snap of the offense. Now, this year he missed 4 or 5 games. He had a neck injury. Came back from that neck injury too, just like whatever it was. But he's damn good, and he's only going to get better. So why do you take somebody else? Yeah, it makes no sense. And then you're putting a rookie in there when you got a guy going into his third year with a shitload of experience.
That's right. You draft a left tackle. He might not be better than Braxton Jones. I mean, there's some good tackles in this draft. In fact, I think I got a list of them. This is
Jono from Penn State, all from Notre Dame are probably the two best left tackles.
Yep. There's a lot of
I've done both. I'll take Braxton over him. He's got better upside.
Oh, there you go. We'll be talking more about tackles in the weeks to come, but there is your endorsement right there. Greg Gabriel said he would take Braxton Jones over the top two tackles coming out in the draft.
All right. If I was still in the position I was, I'd be drooling over that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't find him.
Yeah.
The traits that he has, you do not find. He's not in every draft. They got lucky. And the luck began when he went to Southern Utah. Because who knows what the hell he was in high school. Some kids are late bloomers.
Yeah, exactly. Beniosaurus asks, what's your favorite Robbie Gould moment to announce his retirement yesterday?
Oh, I just like Robbie as a person. I mean, Robbie came in, I think he was in New England's camp originally, but we had liked him. And like most kickers, he didn't get drafted. Only a couple place kickers get drafted a year. And so we followed him in preseason, and he did a pretty good job. And then around the third game or something like that, we signed him. So he's a rookie. And I think this was like his first or second game. And it's on the road. And he made a couple kicks.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially after you win, the plane ride back is fun. It's very casual. Everybody's up, moving around, partying and everything else. So he's in the back of the plane, in the galley in the back of the plane. It's 757. Carrying on conversation, holding court. And you'd think this guy was a 6-year vet. He was a rookie playing his first or second game for the Chicago Bears. So, it just the confidence he had was rare.
Yeah, he was the leader of the players union for a while, or was the representative for the Chicago Bears.
Rep, yeah. But Robbie's a really, really good guy.
Yeah, and I bet you'll be seeing him doing some broadcast work here in Chicago or maybe nationally. We haven't heard the last of Robbie Gould. Hall of Famer?
It's tough for a kicker to get in the Hall of Fame now. He might be dead before he gets in the Hall of Fame.
I know I'll be.
And a hell of a golfer. I love Pat Manley's tweet last night. He said, "Well, it's about time now I can take your money now that you're retired."
That's good
because they always played a lot. I don't know, because Manley moved into the city, so I don't know if Manley is still. I'm not going to mention the club. They're both members at this one club, and played a lot. But when Pat moved into the city, I don't know if he held on to his membership there, because from the city to where that club is a pretty long haul. Because he lives downtown right now. His daughter's going to school in the city.
Season tickets at Soldier Field. We were talking about it was somebody asked Gillian your favorite draft pick. Jordan, I want to share this from Jordan. He says his favorite draft pick that you made was Major Wright. He knows he hurt Urlacher, but Major was so good coming out of college. You tell us a little bit about Major Wright.
Major was a third round pick. We were going to take a safety. I think he was actually the second or third safety we had stacked in that group, and the first two went in front of him. But one of the hardest guys that I ever had to evaluate. And the reason being is his last year at Florida, I watched every game. And if I could find 8 plays to put on a profile tape from that last season, that would be a lot. Nobody threw to the middle of the field against Florida. They had him at one safety and Hill, and I can't remember Hill's first name, as the other safety. Both of them were damn good football players. They always threw outside. So you saw range, you saw run support. You're like, I don't know what he can do in coverage. I don't see it. I had to go back to his first 2 years in Florida and look at that tape. Because the year before there's teams were attacking the center of the field more than they were. But and I'm not lying, that I had to probably look at 16 or 17 games to really get a feel good for what this guy was.
Well, he was one of my favorite safeties. And let's get to the next question here. It comes from Jeff Willis. Can you tell us a little bit about hand usage when it comes to scouting linemen, offensive and defensive, how you determine whether a player is advanced or needs significant work in that area of hand usage?
Well, first of all, it's a great question. But when you're going in, you got to try to figure out what the guy's been taught. And there's it doesn't matter if it's the offensive side or defensive side. There's some coaches that are more inclined to, work on angles, on assignments, things like that, and don't really work enough on hand usage. And probably more so with defensive linemen than offensive linemen. I remember I made a school call. I was doing work for the Eagles. And this one school I was at had a guy's reputation was pretty renowned as a defensive line coach. I was there 2 days. In 2 days of individual, he didn't work on hands once.
Ooh.
And that just jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Because the guy, so what I'm getting to is I try not to downgrade a guy, an offensive or defensive lineman, for hand usage, because he might not have been taught how to use his hands correctly. And it's something that is very coachable and can be taught. And a great example, Rod Marinelli. Rod Marinelli is huge on hand usage. He spends the first 15 minutes of every practice, or the first part of, say the first half of individual, with nothing but hand work. And pre-practice, you better be working on your hands. When it doesn't count, you better. I mean, he just drilled it into you. You had to use your hands. You had to use your hands, and all different ways you using your hands. And our guys were damn good using their hands. So it is a coaching thing. So if you see a guy that doesn't use his hands that well, the first thing you got to think, what was he being coached? Now, I'll give you an example. Jerry and I were watching film. It was like lineman from Cal, offensive lineman. So I think he was a right tackle or something. And he might have been an inside player. I don't remember where he was. But anyway, he'd set and he put his hands out like this right away. And Jared, big dog, he can't use his hands. Look at that. So, Jared, look at the other five guys along the line. They're all doing the same thing. Can't knock him for doing what he's being told to do.
Excellent.
They bring him out like this, and then he bring him in here. Well, that's terrible. That's terrible. You want the guy to come out of the stands and be here and punch from here. You don't want guys going like this. But it's, in its proper placement. You got, depending on what you're doing, you're going to have like one hand here and another hand right here or whatever. But some of that is advanced. And if the coach doesn't teach it, how can you possibly downgrade the guy for it? Now, if he's really good, then you upgrade him. And there's a kid I do for this agent I work for, and he was only a freshman. And this was just, it might have been earlier this week or last week. I just said, his hand use for a kid that young was really advanced. So some of it was instinctive, or the guy has watched a lot of defensive linemen and just, knows what he wants to be. And it sunk in because he was pretty good. But I hope Mr. Willis accepts that answer, because that's the best way I can do it. You got you got to take it for what it is. You can't kill a guy if he hasn't been coached.
Yep. Wow, it's great that you observed, that you noticed.
You got to look at the chat with offensive linemen and defensive linemen. A lot of it is about the natural traits. Can an offensive lineman bend? Does he have good feet? Does he stand up when he comes out of his stance, or does he gradually come up? When you got the end zone view, what's he look like in his stance? Is he real comfortable sitting in his stance? Does he get down low, or his legs all bowed out, which means he's tight in the hips and knees and maybe even the ankles? So you got to look at all these little things, but you got to have the natural traits to work with. And then you add it with the advanced coaching that you're going to get in the NFL.
I've got this sudden urge to evaluate tape now of offensive and defensive linemen. I love it. Jeff's twin brother, Tim, asked in his presser. Oh, we talked about this. In his presser, he said the bubbles were RPOs, and Justin had the chance to hand it off and run, and there were a few that he threw that should have been handoffs. Even if they are RPOs, you still scheme the bubbles and not slants or other quick pass options. So you did talk about this earlier.
I agree. Yeah, I already talked about it, but I agree with Tim, and I was referring to him when I mentioned it.
Okay.
The play's the play, but that's it. I didn't like that Luke was kind of throwing Justin under the bus on that.
Yeah.
Because you know what? That was what Luke said. Does that make it gospel? I'm not saying it, everybody's got their own way of answering questions, I guess.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting. Danny Shimon weeks ago started to detect what he thought was Getsy and some of the coaches saying things that were throwing Justin Fields under the bus. Potentially, he said, because they're thinking we need to save our jobs. We're losing too many games, and we're going to get blamed when the quarterback is responsible for some of it. Well,
guess what? You ain't saving your job that way, because the general manager is not an idiot.
Yeah.
And don't forget, he played the game at a high level. He was a multi-year starter at Boston College. He was in our camp. Didn't make the squad. Obviously, didn't make the practice squad. It's because Ryan Poles has skinny legs. He did not have the natural traits that you want an offensive lineman to have, but he's a good college football player.
Okay. Martin asks, why is the following year's pick considered a round less in value? For the Bears, that could be 8 picks higher than the number 1 overall. What moron came up with this theory, and why is it followed league-wide?
When you're doing a trade like with the first round, that you throw that out. Because if you're getting a first rounder, you're getting a first rounder. And in the case of, when the Bears made that trade with Carolina last year, they didn't know that pick's going to be the first pick. They got right now, 5 games to go, they got a 2-game lead on that first pick. It's almost a lock now that it's going to be not quite, but the New England and Arizona have each won 3 games. So now, it's getting close. Another couple of weeks, you're going to know it's a lock. But generally speaking, like when you're talking 3rd round, 4th round, something like that, then you're getting to get that pick a year later.
Right,
it's a little bit discounted because you're not seeing them now. You're seeing them a year from now. So a 3rd next year is like a 4th today. Because I'd rather have that 3rd, or I'd rather have a 4th today that I know I can get a good football player with, than where I don't know where the hell that 3 is going to be next year.
Yeah. Exciting times coming. Even Sunday's game I'm looking forward to. Let's win this game. All right, I got more questions for you, and let's go to this one. Greg, can you explain how the draft trade value points system works if the Bears were to trade the number one pick? And here's what I did, Greg. When I saw this question, I went and looked for a chart with the trade value. Now, I picked this one only because it aesthetically looked the best of the ones that I picked. It was produced by the Huddle Report. And so these are all hieroglyphics up on the screen because the numbers are so small.
They're all the same.
Right.
But when you're trading for the number one pick, well, first of all, that is not the trade chart is not an absolute. It's a guide.
Right.
Okay. So it gives you like a base point.
Uh-huh.
When you're dealing for the first round, the first pick in the draft, second pick in the draft, now it becomes more of a market thing. Who wants it and what are you going to pay? So you throw the chart out the window, it means nothing on a trade like that. So, but if you go back and you start looking at trades as you get into the draft, they match up pretty damn well. So but I always have it with me when I'm watching the draft now. You just want to see if it's close. If you're, depending on where the picks end up, if you're a few points off, so what? Because number one, when you're trading to get a pick, the player, you already know who you're getting. You're trading for that pick to move up to get a particular player. So that has value to you.
Right. What's interesting here is as I look at this chart, the Bears, if they do end up with the first overall, that's 3,000 points. Right now, the Cardinals, who have the third pick, their value is 2,200.
So it's 800 points. So they'd have to come up with on this. They'd have to come up with another one.
Right.
So like a mid-round one, but because you're going from 3 to 1, you got to pay more than that.
Gotcha. Because I know that I believe Arizona has 2 first-round picks.
They do. I think right now it stands at around 18 or something like that, but that'll change.
Yeah. Right.
The only one that's not going to change right now, I think, is Carolina. That's just about a lock.
Yeah. So it actually is at 22. So if you were to trade, if you were to trade, that would be 780 points with the 2,200. You would actually have to add something on that trade if you wanted to basically get both first round picks from the Cardinals this year. It's an interesting scenario.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're gonna know who you can get at 3. And if I know polls like last year, he originally wanted to trade in his head. He wanted to trade to the Colts and then down to the Cardinals, but the Colts weren't interested in trading. He wanted to make 2 trades. So, and when he found out that wasn't going to work, then he just went to Carolina. But you got to go back, and I don't have it with me. Houston moved up with Arizona last year. What did Houston give up?
Oh gosh, I forgot.
Yeah, well, that gives you an idea. What. But again, it changes. The chart is a guide, and the value of the players, the perceived value of the players at the top of the draft, play into it too. So if you've got 4 teams or 5 teams that want that pick, come on, keep up, and how bad do you want it?
Exactly. All right, let's see. Got one more question here from the Baba Black Sheep is back. Other than CW and DM, are there any quarterbacks you think are worthy of a first round pick? So other than Williams and Drake May, are there any other quarterbacks you think are worthy of a first pick? This guy from LSU, Jaden Daniels, if he comes out, he's rocketing.
Oh, he's coming out. He's done.
Oh, okay.
He's done. He's used up all his eligibility.
Gotcha.
He's pretty darn good, and really, I think really progressed a lot from last year to this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now it doesn't hurt that he's got 2 first-round caliber receivers,
Mm-hmm.
but you still got to get him the ball, and he's deadly accurate. There's a lot of people that really like Nix.
Mm-hmm.
Nix has played a lot of football. I think he's been a 5-year starter now between Auburn and Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that like McCarthy. I'm not as high on McCarthy and some others, but I don't think McCarthy gets out of the second round. But you just look at the history of the draft in recent years. How many quarterbacks go in the first round? There's going to be 4 or 5. That's the way it is right now. And people overvalue the position because I got to get one. And I'm not waiting, because if I wait, I may never get one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Let's see. Got more comments. Gillian asked, back to the wide receiver. You think that the Bears are going to target a wide receiver early in this draft? Let me ask you this.
How early?
Let's say the Bears move down to the middle or late first round with one of those picks. Do you think they might grab somebody like a Keon Coleman, who is probably going to be drafted in that round, in that area?
Yeah. I do not believe, looking at Ryan Pohl's history and looking at the history of who he's worked for, because I already did the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City has never drafted receivers in the first round, not since Andy's been there, and actually, and so going back, and they didn't when Pioli was the head coach, or head coach was the GM, and that's who Ryan started with. They've taken receivers in the second round, but they've been both the times they've been in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Andy himself, having worked for Andy for 1 year, he's not a big believer in taking a first round receiver. Okay, it's a very, very, very important position,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a premium position. And when you're a team like when you want to use, let's say you wanted to use a 3rd or 4th pick in the draft on Harrison, okay, that's fine. But the team who does that could trade up for that,
Mm-hmm.
because they perceive him as the missing link. He's the guy that's going to put us over the top. The Bears haven't reached that position yet.
Yeah.
And they've got too many other areas that are considered premium where they would do it. I don't care. I can upset all of Chicagoland. I don't care. I will say right now that the Bears end up drafting in the top 4. They will not take Harrison. Like I said, I'd rather have Neighbors at 8 or 9 than a premium player at 3 or 4 than Harrison and a lot lesser player at 9, because Neighbors is freaking great.
And you wrote about him at Windy City Gridiron, saying that he's the best run after the catch receiver.
Oh, he's amazing.
And Eric writes, have you had the chance to check out Malachi the Yak God Corley? I have not. Have you?
No.
All right. Somebody we will take a look at and report back.
Let me write that name down.
Malachi.
It's Malachi.
Malachi. I love that. I wouldn't spell it that way, but Malachi. I wish I was named Malachi.
No, we had a couple of Malachis on the DC Defenders. That's so.
Yeah. Okay.
I learned how that pronunciation.
Jordan asks, out of curiosity, what does Greg think of Ryan Post continuing to keep people like Velus Jones on the roster despite woeful production? Even a guy like Dominique Robinson, you could say the same for. What do you think about those guys still being on the roster?
Well, number one, it's only their second year. You drafted them, you invested on it. You're going to give them every opportunity to fail. They had high hopes for Robinson going in to this year, but it hasn't translated into production on the field. Velus, it's. I'm not going to use age on it because that's just a number. he's talented, but we haven't seen the talent.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it's probably confidence or lack thereof. I would not be a bit surprised to see him not here. Now, here's one thing. We got to make one thing kind of clear here. When we start talking about the draft, players we talk about now, and if they make a coaching change, might not even be in the equation 3 months from now.
Oh, interesting.
Why is that? Different schemes.
Yes. But there, one of the things that you said earlier, I think a show or two ago, Greg, that really caught my eye is that you said on defense, these schemes are almost all complement one another. And so you could take a guy like Gervon Dexter.
Yeah, especially when you get into, everybody's playing sub. So they're playing 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers,
exactly,
5 defensive backs or whatever. That's true, but when you got your base.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I was watching some of that game last night. And now, Pittsburgh has looked just awful the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, could Tomlin be in trouble? And then, okay, if Tomlin was in trouble and he was available, would that be a guy he wanted? Okay, now, and the only reason I'm thinking of that and bringing this up is because his defensive philosophy is going to be totally opposite of what Flus is.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 3-4 guy, pure 3-4 guy. So, the way they use, Sweat would play on his feet like JJ or TJ Watt plays, and even though he's a lot bigger, do they have all the bodies they would need to play that scheme the way Tomlin plays? They got a few. I don't know if they got them all, but then you could see that another interior, if that was the case, another interior defensive lineman would become, a guy that you either want through free agency or the draft. And don't forget, free agency comes before the draft. You start worrying about what a team's going to draft after they sign their free agents, because that you're trying to fill the needs with two different areas. So once they take care of one area, then you got the other. Then you go in and say, okay, this is what we've got to attack in the draft. Like, perfect example was he wanted to go into free agency and hopefully get a right tackle. Okay, got more than, and it turned out being a blessing, because McGlinchey, they were okay with the average. They weren't okay with the guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
And McGlinchey hasn't played that good. And you got a rookie, so you change course. Okay, I'm going to draft him. No, I couldn't get on. I'm going to draft him. Well, the guy he drafts can be better than McGlinchey anyway, and probably by next year. So he might be better right now. So
totally agree with that.
So that's the best way to do it. You got needs going into both areas,
mm-hmm.
which you don't get in one, you're going to try to get in the other.
Somebody asked a question. I'll put it up here on the screen. Greg, would you trade for Mike Tomlin? And I'm actually looking up his contract status. It expires at the end of next season. So let's say the Bears decided to move on, and let's say the Steelers Ryan Poles and said, listen, I understand you're looking for a head coach. Are you interested in Mike Tomlin?
No,
send us a second-round pick.
No,
wouldn't do it, huh? Why?
Well, because if they're calling you and saying that, means they're going to get rid of him anyway.
Very good. I'm going to take you to buy my next car. Very good. All right. Jordan wants to know, what do you think about J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback over at Michigan?
I like him. I don't love him. If you look at when he's, first of all, they played two good teams all year.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan
mm-hmm.
played a horseshit schedule.
Yeah.
And Ohio State was the only good team they played. And then they played, and Iowa's defense gave them all they could handle in the Big Ten championship game last week. Let's see what he does against Alabama. The guy's talented. I think he goes in the second. There's some people who think he'll go in the first, and he may. But I'm not sold that he's legit. I personally don't think he's a first rounder right now, especially because he has struggled against the better teams.
I got to tell you, I feel almost exactly the same way about JJ that you do. I know Jordan loves him, and I'm going to study him. I've only casually watched 2 or 3 Michigan games this season, but I want to understand what it is Jordan loves so much about that guy. Maybe he can talk about it on his next show.
Well, when you're throwing to wide open receivers, you better freaking hit him. I mean, but like I say, look at what he played a damn good defense last week. And Iowa doesn't necessarily have the fastest defense, but they're very sound, very well coached. And so he didn't have a real good game. And there's been you can find other games which does it against really tough teams. No question he's talented, can make plays with his feet, got a decent arm. To me, if he's a first, he's a 20 to 32 first, not a top 20 first.
Great question here from Bruce Ali Walter Jordan, because I think this is going to impact the Bears draft. What do you think about the play of Gervon Dexter lately? I went into the season thinking the Bears still need a 3-tech, but now I'm starting to wonder the priority of drafting a 3-tech maybe isn't as much now because
he is Dexter, a 3-tech.
Exactly. Dexter is coming on and could be a really special 3-tech.
I forget, he only played 3 years of college. He played an entirely different, played in a 2-gap scheme. He had to learn how to play in an attacking 1-gap scheme. So he had, and it's not like he played I don't think he played 4 years of high school football. So his experience has been limited. Again, go to the traits. And the traits are there. And now Justin Jones is in the last year of his contract. Do you keep him and bring him back another year? He's played pretty good. You cannot deny that. And, the rotation is good. But in saying all that, and I'm getting ahead of myself when I said I wouldn't do it, we got to know, what are they going to be playing next year? Because that could change everything.
Yeah. That is fascinating. We'll talk more about that in the near future. In these last few minutes, I want to get some more of our questions because we had so many of them. Leandis, if you can't get a first-round pick for your quarterback, do you really have a franchise quarterback? So he was talking, people in the chat were talking about trading Justin Fields and what you would get for him and so forth. So everyone is kind of in agreement. I've heard a lot of people in the media saying for Justin Fields, you're only going to get a second-round quarterback. So
who knows what you're going to get for him in reality?
Right.
You know what he's worth? What another team will pay for him.
Yeah. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, what would you pay for him?
I can't answer that because number one, I'm not the Atlanta Falcons. So it's who do they have that in the case, Ryan Pace is the director of player personnel there, so he's got some say. He's the guy who drafted him, and so maybe he's worth one to them. Maybe he's not. You cannot deny the raw talent. And I'll go back to what I was saying. I don't think the play calling, I'm not going to say the scheme, the play calling, because you can make your scheme fit. You can stay within the scheme and still make it fit the strengths of the player. And I don't think the play calling has helped him. Now, could there be some stuff I don't know? Absolutely. But from everything you see on the outside, I there's a little more to this guy. and I don't like all the noise that he has to go through. I this week they're talking to him. You know, the media saying, well, "What do you think about this? You make a trade and run it." He goes, "I only control what I can control." Well, guess who's making the noise? The assholes that were asking him the fucking question.
I love it.
Right? I mean, is that the truth? So there's, if I'm Justin, I'm saying, well, if you guys shut up, I don't have to worry about it because you're the guy saying it.
They're doing their job, though, right?
Am I telling the truth?
You're telling the truth, but that's the media's job.
They bring up narratives that aren't necessarily true.
That is
correct. And they end up putting pressure on a player maybe he doesn't deserve.
I agree with that. Totally agree with that. Foster has a question about this upcoming game. Greg, with the D-line not up to par in Detroit, do you think we should run the ball more this time around versus the Lions than we did in that first matchup?
Well,
and
that one defensive lineman, interior guys out.
Aline McNeil.
Yeah.
Aline McNeil. Yeah,
he's out.
Yes.
He got hurt. In fact, I thought he wasn't before they put him on IR. I was watching their game last week against New Orleans. He got hurt 2 or 3 different times in that game where he had to come out.
Yeah.
So you knew that, you know, his days for this week were numbered. So now he's out for at least 4 weeks, and you know, who knows, maybe longer. You got to look at a number of things. First, the weather. Right now, the weather's mid-30s. And dry. Is it going to stay that way for Sunday? That's going to. I think he's going to try to run. But you know how good your running game's as good as your offensive line can block for that. And generally speaking, this team, you know, at least over the last 7-8 games, has blocked pretty damn well for the run. And you're going to have Foreman back, who I think is the best back they got.
Yeah, I didn't know Foreman was going to be back, and that is
he's been full in practice the first 2 days.
I smell a Bears win here, Greg. I really do.
You know what? I do too. You know what? Put it this way: they know they blew the last one in Detroit's house, in perfect conditions. Okay, well, this game ain't going to be perfect conditions for Detroit. Perfect for the Bears, and not perfect for Detroit. And I think that when you've watched Detroit over the last month, they're not as good as they were the first half of the season.
Yeah, that's right. I think, and there's a lot of injuries that are starting to really impact their play on defense. Offensively, they can still play. They've got an injury now to their center, Frank Ragnow, but I think he might play.
No, I don't think he's practiced yet. He might have.
Okay.
I looked. He did not practice on Wednesday. I did not look at yesterday's designation. But then they put Glasgow over. They have to really change 2 positions because they moved Glasgow from guard into center. So you're changing 2 positions to fix 1. Goff is good when he's got a clean pocket. And I'll say this, like I said, going into the first game. Hit that guy in the mouth once or twice, it's all over. He tanks.
Yeah, that's so true. So true of many of us, too. You hit me a couple times in the mouth, you'll never see me again. I'm out the door. All right, let's squeeze a couple more in, and then I promise for the questions that we did not get through, I'm going to grab screen grabs, and the next time we get together, we'll address those. Bear Truth 9 has an interesting question. How would Ryan Post or GMs that you know of, Greg, break down offensive and defensive game tape to make sure that they know exactly what they are seeing to be able to accurately keep coaches accountable? They have people who help them. That's a great question. The breaking down of all of this tape, and you earlier in the show, and I urge everyone, if you've missed part of the show, go back and please listen to the rest because you're going to learn a lot. But if, you know, the whole aspect of having a scouting department, it's really difficult to double or in some cases triple check the work of your scouts. But how do you
but
go
your
about quality control?
your scouts aren't doing your own team.
Oh, okay.
They're doing college players. Now you might have a pro scout, but I go back to when I was here, and it wasn't digitized, so we didn't get to watch the tape until the next morning.
Right.
Where now you can watch it on, literally watch it on. You can be done watching the tape, depending on how long the play ride is. You can watch the game 5 times on the plane. Depending on what you're looking for. But Gion's job is to know the scheme and to know what his players or what the players are being asked to do. And, it's not easy you got to review 22 players, both sides of the ball.
Right.
It takes time. It takes a position coach. That's why I laugh at Pro Football Focus. They come out with grades 2 hours after a game. Give me a freaking break. It takes a position coach, unless he's got like the tight ends, he's only got a couple guys. It takes a position coach who has a good sized group 4 or 5 hours to grade his players. And he knows exactly what they're being asked to do on every single play. So where these idiots at PFF, they don't know what the guy's supposed to do.
Right.
They don't know what each player is designated to do on a certain play. They're guessing. Yeah. So I laugh at some of those grades. There's no way they are close to being accurate.
But what about the scouts who are looking at college tape? Is there a way that the GM, how does he evaluate the scouting of his scouts?
Well, number one, the scouts are supposed to know. Remember, we've talked about this before. We especially talked about it last spring. There's a profile written up for every position.
That's right.
Okay, so within this scheme, there's a profile. We know what we're looking for at a left end. We know what we're looking for in a right end. We know what we're looking for in a nose. We know what we're looking for a 3. We know what we're looking for in a Mike and a Will, etc. So you're grading your play when you go out in the fall. You're grading your players based on the profile. Now, what you cannot do is downgrade the guy because he doesn't fit the profile. Give him a fair grade. You're just not going to draft him.
Right.
When we had the plus minus system or vanilla, when a plus meant he was a fit. So you say, okay, I'm going to give him an A67 plus. That's a lower first round pick, and a plus means he fits the scheme. But if I give him an A67 minus, he can't do what he's going to be asked to do. So I might not even, he's a 67. He's a good football player, but I'm not drafting him. Why am I going to take a player that can't do what we're going to ask him to do?
Good stuff. Let's see. What time is it? We got about 5 minutes left here. I got to make a quick announcement on the show. We've got a special Mike North, somebody big just died, coming up at 12:30, and Norman Lear. Greg, you know Norman Lear, the creator?
I know who he is. I don't know him. Funny. Great writer.
Yeah, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Maude, all those shows that you and I grew up watching.
They probably couldn't even put All in the Family on TV now because the woke public wouldn't allow it.
Very, very true. Let's see. One last one here, and then we'll get everybody out of here. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Here it comes. He's one. Just curious, is just wondering about Xavier Legette. Have you had a good look at him, and is he a first rounder? Because he's this tall. I think he runs. Somebody said he runs a 4.2, 4.27, something like that. Big, tall guy with outstanding speed.
I have not done Legette yet. I got to break that name down.
Okay, put that one down, and then let's see.
I've done well over 300, but he's one of the ones I haven't done.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mike Gibson says, Greg, my thought has been front offices believe in their grading of current players and draft players. Do you think the Bears have Caleb Williams and Drake May rated higher or lower than Justin? So this is pure speculation on your part. How would you grade him? Actually, you're on record as saying Justin Fields is better.
I going into the year, I thought that Caleb Williams was going to be Mahomes Jr. Based on his 1 year at Oklahoma and his 1 year at USC. I mean, he was outstanding last year. He was outstanding the first part of this year. Granted, his supporting cast at USC was not as good, but so what? The last half of the season, actually starting with the Notre Dame game, it's like, who's that guy? It's like he's an imposter or somebody. It's not the same player. So you gotta go back and find out why. And I think we discussed this before. That's a situation where, and it's not talking to the kid, it's talking to his coaches. Why did this happen? This great player who made every play in the world, all of a sudden he's not making plays and he's throwing interceptions. And, can you give us an answer as to why that was happening? Because who would know it better than the coach?
Right.
Now you just got to hope the coach is being honest with you. But that's why you talk to more than one person. Drake May, a little bit of the same. Drake May is really, really talented. Now, Drake May doesn't have anywhere close to the talent at North Carolina that some of these other guys had, that like Stroud had at Ohio State, Fields had at Ohio State, or whatever. And let's compare that just for a second. Justin Fields was a lot better at Ohio State than C.J. Stroud was. Not even close. Justin Fields beat Michigan twice. Stroud got killed by Michigan twice. But why is Stroud so good as a rookie?
I got a feeling.
Coach who knows what the fuck he's doing.
All right. That's a perfect way to end this episode of GTF, the Greg Gabriel Show. Gabriel Talks Football. Greg, you and I we're scheduled to be back here Monday at 11 a.m. to talk about the Bears win over the Detroit Lions. Is that a deal?
Yep.
All right. And then I want to end this show with a little promotion for some of our podcast friends from other networks. So I've got 3 or 4 commercials coming from them, and then we'll run our closing credits. And then stick around, please, to watch Mike North and Joe Mandel talk about the great Norman Lear, who passed away recently at the age of 101. Take care, everybody.
Wow, it's that old. Wow, I didn't know. I didn't realize that old.
He was that old. Take care, bye.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a quarterback in the NFL? I have. The quarterback position is arguably the most difficult position in all of sports due to its physical and mental nature. Join me by watching me on this channel on my journey to become an NFL quarterback.
The best Chicago Bears content anywhere. Catch Nomad live pregame 1 hour prior to kickoff, and Nomad at night postgame, and every Friday evening at 7 p.m. Central on all the most popular streaming platforms, and only on the Nomad Network.